Yes. So now the next part is about why Cosmos? What problems are we actually trying to solve? And the two problems that Cosmos is tackling is scalability and interoperability. Scalability in the sense, scalability currently involves writing better applications, right? We want to write faster EVM implementations so we can support more than 10 transactions a second. But this is really not where the scalability comes from. We need horizontal scalability instead of vertical scalability. With the Cosmos Hub, we can easily support hundreds of thousands of transactions because we're not limited to writing faster and faster applications, but when we need more throughput, we can just spin up other zones. And Ash talked a little bit about zones, and I'll go more into depth about it. But you're not limited by the throughput of your application. Because if you need more throughput, you can just add another instance of your application. It's very much like when Netflix or when Didi needs more capacity to handle more users a second. They don't rewrite the application stack. They add another server instance to handle the extra load. And I think one of the best analogies that I can come up with what this is on a protocol level is, in the beginning we had, this is more like TCP/IP. Cosmos is the TCP/IP layer that enables the connection of different blockchains. So even though they're different blockchains with different application states, you can still connect them through the Cosmos Hub. Yes, so to the theory. So how does this actually work? And I'm not going to go into too much detail since Ash already mentioned it. We can have easy value transfer between zones. So we have here the Cosmos Hub, and then we can have theoretically more than one Cosmos Hub, and on a practical level that will happen, because we might have one geographical hub for Europe, let's say, one for North America, one for Asia. But for simplicity, let's start with one hub. So one Cosmos Hub can have multiple zones connected to it. And I'm going to use the example of Ethermint, which is our implementation of the EVM. And our implementation of the EVM, currently as a standalone zone, can handle roughly 200 transactions a second, which is already 20 times more than what Ethereum on the mainnet can actually handle. But this wouldn't solve our scalability problem, right? Because eventually, once everyone in the world uses it, even 200 transactions a second isn't enough anymore. What the Cosmos Hub allows you to do, though, is, let's say we have one Ethermint zone up here, and suddenly we're hitting the network limit, we're hitting the 200 transactions a second. We can easily just add a second Ethermint zone. And they have separate state updates, so they can run fully independently. But when you want to move money, or when you want to move Ether or tokens, or ERC20 tokens, between those two zones, you literally just go through a Cosmos Hub. And it's as if you have 400 transactions per second with one Ethermint instance. And theoretically, these zones can even just connect to each other. But on a practical level, once we have, let's say, like 10 or 100 zones, it becomes very inefficient to maintain direct connections between all the zones. So that's why, most likely, even from an economics perspective, there will be a hub forming, a hub that takes transaction fees for actually maintaining connections to all the separate zones. And as such, hubs are secure connectors for different zones. And I've mentioned Ethermint, but one of the zones could also be Bitcoin, a Bitcoin zone, or an Ethereum peg zone. And the way that this would work is that you have an Ethereum peg zone, which if you want to transfer money, and I will talk a little bit more about this later, how we can securely move money from the main Ethereum network to the Ethereum peg zone. From the Ethereum peg zone, you can now move it into the hub, and from the hub, you can move it over to the Ethermint zone, where you can now run transactions. By the way, if you have questions, please write them down. Because, yeah. So, now let's talk about the building blocks. So, what are we actually developing as part of this project? At the core of it all is the Tendermint consensus engine, which is a proof-of-stake consensus engine that I will explain in a little bit more detail later on. But you can just think about it that this Tendermint consensus engine has the ability to connect to other Tendermint consensus engines, so it does the peer-to-peer networking. And it does the global ordering of transactions. The next thing is the Cosmos Hub. And the Cosmos Hub is a multi-asset ledger, right? The only thing that it does is it tracks how many tokens a user or a zone holds within the Cosmos ecosystem. And it does, so it's actually a very simple kind of application, but it's at the core, so it's very important. And this is built on top of the Weave Sdk. And by the way, we've done a bit of renaming lately, so all our documentation might not be up to date yet. But the Weave Sdk, it's a cryptocurrency framework written in Go that allows anyone to easily build applications on top of Tendermint. This is also what is used by the Counter app, so that I don't have to re-implement everything from scratch, but I can rather reuse a lot of the components. Moreover, we're building the Ethereum peg zone because we want to be able to allow people to immediately move some value into the Cosmos ecosystem. And yeah, lastly, as I said before, we're building Ethermint, which is our first zone that's connected to the Ethermint and the Ethereum peg zone are the first two zones connected to the Cosmos Hub. It's just that people have the ability to, for example, to deploy smart contracts. And interesting enough, I've been working with two projects, one in AI and one in token creation, that hit the limits of Ethereum and that didn't want unpredictability. That suddenly, if there's an ICO happening, the Ethereum network clocks up for 2 days, and you can't actually run any transactions anymore. And that's why I'm working with them on getting them up and running on Ethermint, because from a developer perspective, it is exactly the same ecosystem. So Ethermint is fully compatible with things like Web3. We run the same Solidity code, it's the same EVM. All the normal tooling that has already been built around the entire Ethereum ecosystem just works, but at 20 times the speed. Yes, now I want to talk about Cosmos apps, and Ethermint and the Ethereum peg zone are examples of Cosmos apps. Cosmos apps are things that connect to the Cosmos Hub. And everyone in the world can build their own zone with their own business logic and connect it to the Cosmos Hub. And that's really important to stress. There are no limits to what you can build. You can write it in your own language, you can write it in Haskell, Java, OCaml, it doesn't matter. You can write it in any sort of programming language you imagine. And the only requirement is that you implement one tiny protocol to be able to communicate with the Tendermint core instance. Do you have any other point about this? Oh yeah, and probably the coolest feature about all of this is that in most of the other blockchain implementations that try to tackle the scalability and interoperability issue, the problem is always that, let's say you're a private company like Didi or Deutsche Bank, and you want to run an application that connects to other blockchains or to the Cosmos Hub. You always have to open source your business logic. This is not the case with the Cosmos Hub. You can, if you're a private company and you don't want to open source all your stuff, you can run a completely private Cosmos app and connect it to the hub. So as a company, from a company perspective, you're still able to fully control the data, the users, the application of it. You're never giving away trade secrets, for example. But you're still able to securely interact with the rest of the ecosystem. You're still able to securely send tokens from your zone to the Cosmos Hub, to a decentralized exchange where people can then change into a different token and back. As an example, I'm going to give you Airbnb. For example, if Airbnb didn't want to pay credit card fees anymore, they could choose to pay their hosts in Airbnb tokens. And they could choose to implement this as a Cosmos app. With this, every time, let's say I stay at an Airbnb, my host doesn't get paid in US dollars. He gets paid in Airbnb tokens. And they're issued by the Airbnb zone. My host might not have much use because he might not use Airbnb actually, so he can't. So he wants to use his Airbnb tokens for something else, right? But so what does he do with his Airbnb tokens? Well, he can move them to the Cosmos Hub and then to his exchange or decentralized exchange, or pay on some other zone of them. Suddenly, private companies can issue tokens that are fully compatible with the rest of the ecosystem. I know this was a very quick introduction, but I hope that I've given you some sort of idea of what the Cosmos Hub can do and what Cosmos can do, and how you can use it. We will dive more into the technicalities of it later on. But one of the things that I really want you to take away from this is that we can't be building blockchain applications in silos anymore. We really need to get into this, first of all, interoperability mindset plus scalability mindset. If we really want to take blockchains to, let's say, even just China, we need to have a way different approach that needs to be closer to what we did with the internet than what we're currently doing where everyone is building silos. Yeah, so thank you very much. Again, and yeah, maybe now let's actually take some questions.
We have what microphones. Actually, Haifeng already, where is Haifeng?
I already submitted questions to the address.
Okay. Can you help? Can you come up to help?
Oh yeah. Yeah, sure.
So what we should do is, actually, there are some Chinese questions. So I will ask Haifeng to ask that to English to agent.
There you go.
I think I already posted the question to the address.
Yeah, it is.
All right.
Sure.
So.
So if you have a question, I can clarify.
Let's see.
Oh, you already translated that in English.
That's right.
Very good.
Okay, now let's see if internet works. Yeah. Give it time, right?
It does. I'll list elements on the page that are referring to some resources you can't get to.
I tested this morning, it should work. Oh. Alright, let's get to it from a phone. Okay, well, in the meantime, we can actually, if you have questions on WeChat, let's just take them.
Yeah.
You can read it out.
Or if you actually see the other questions, that'd be great too.
Yeah, so you can copy those questions from WeChat group. 第一个，我先用中文啊，然后再翻译成英文。第一个问题就是说，之前比特币最多只能有3个托管人，就是从多签来说啊。然后现在比特币隔离见证以后呢，据说对这个多签支持比较好。那么现在呢，不知道能否支持大于3个人的多签名，进而能支持100多人的 Cosmos 验证人集合来托管 BTC。这块呢，实际上我这个问题理解的也不是特别好啊，不知道这个翻译对不对啊？ So Adrian, here's the question. So, Bitcoin multi-sig used to support up to 3 signatures. With the activation of SegWit, can Bitcoin now support multi-sig with more than 3 signers? So this is the first question. The second, and how can Cosmos 100 validators be trusted to secure BTC? Or and later, then the following sentence I added. So, or maybe this SegWit is an irrelevant issue with Cosmos validators.
So yes, I don't know enough about Bitcoin to say whether Bitcoin with SegWit supports more than 3 multi-sig signatures. For Cosmos, it is not a relevant issue itself. It might be for the Bitcoin peg zone because of we ideally need at least 100-person multi-sig wallet or multi-sig to be able to have 100% security behind the Bitcoin peg or in an easy to manage fashion. But in itself, the Bitcoin issues are not a problem for Cosmos.
准备回答你的问题了吗？没太清楚是吧？他的问题是我理解是这样，他说实际上这个Bitcoin multi-sig 的这个问题和这个Cosmos 100个见证人这个是不相关的一个事情。他说 Cosmos 这个 validator 和这个不相关，只要是我理解应该是不相关的。具体细节我觉得我们要下来这个是专门跟那个 agent 讨论一下。OK，the second question， 就是比特币和以太坊转接桥的具体架构是怎么样的？大概何时上线？What are the architectural details of a Bitcoin or Ethereum relay bridge or peg zone? I think. When will they be up and running?
So the Ethereum peg zone will be up and running by the end of this year. From an architecture point, it is that on the Ethereum side, there is a Cosmos bridge contract, which is controlled by the Cosmos validator set. So it's literally a multi-account holder. And when you want to move Ether from Ethereum into the Cosmos ecosystem, what happens is you send, let's say, 1 Ether into the Cosmos bridge contract, and then the Ethereum peg zone needs their, let's say, their validators running the Ethereum peg zone, right? Everything needs to be backed by a validator. These validators are also running full Ethereum clients, so they see the state updates that a transaction, that some money has been deposited into the Ethereum smart contract, the bridge contract. When, let's say, after 12 confirmations, so because with proof of work we always have this problem that we actually never have finality. Once we have the money locked up there with some sort of security, they can create a pegged Ether on the Ethereum on the Ethereum peg zone, and then that pegged Ether can be moved into the Cosmos Hub and to the wider ecosystem. On the way back, it's you move it back into the Ethereum peg zone, and then the validators have to submit a proof that this transaction actually happened within the Cosmos Hub, and send that towards the smart contract and the bridge contract. And the bridge contract itself is tracking the validator set changes of the Cosmos Hub. So if they receive a valid transaction, a valid proof, they release the money back to whichever account you wanted. Okay. This is from a very high level, by the way. There's a bunch more incentives in terms of how you can report fraud and things like that.
OK， 这个我大概听懂了对吧？对，你需要我大概翻译一下吗？需不需要？实际上这个有好多细节，但是大体上是这样的，就是说，一个就像以太坊这样已经存在的区块链，它本身不是基于Tendermint 的，所以在它和这个 Cosmos Hub 之间，你要建一个 peg zone， 这个 peg zone 是基于 Tendermint 的。那么这个 peg zone 里面 run 的这些 validator， 它必须是以太坊的 client。那在以太坊里面呢，会写一个叫桥接的 smart contract 智能合约。那就是说，如果是有谁想从以太坊向Cosmos 转账的话，他就实际上是要在以太坊里向这个桥接的这个 smart contract 转账。然后这个转账经过这个Merkle Proof 一段时间确认以后呢，会被这个peg zone 里面的这些 client 会观察到，然后他们就会把这个就相当于在 peg zone 里创建对应的叫 peg ether， 然后这个 peg ether 呢再通过 IBC 协议传送到那个 Cosmos Hub 里面，然后 Cosmos Hub 最后产生相应的这个就是说对应的一个基于 Merkle Proof 产生一个相应的这个转账的一个记录。那反过来就是这个过程也是类似的，那就是通过Cosmos Hub 里面的 validator 要提供一个交易的 Merkle Proof 到 peg zone，peg zone 验证了这个交易以后呢，会创建相应的 peg ether， 然后把这个 peg ether 写回到那个smart contract 的另外的方法里面，然后 smart contract 验证以后呢，会释放相应的这个锁定的这个 ether。大致这和侧链是非常像的这样一个过程，大概是这样。当然这里有很多细节啊，他也说了，这里没办法讲很多细节，大概是这样。OK。他什么？啊？对。What about Bitcoin?
You mean for the Bitcoin peg zone?
Peg zone, yeah.
In terms of when it's up and running?
Yeah, when will it be up and running?
Sometime next year. If you're very much interested in building a Bitcoin peg zone, please talk to me and talk to the team. We're definitely looking for people to help us with the Bitcoin peg zone, because from a technological perspective, it's actually the Bitcoin system isn't great to build peg zones. Yeah. Smart contract linearity is a great. Right, there was another good question. So the question is, how do you make smart contracts terminate on Tendermint? Tendermint itself does not implement the smart contracting language. So with Ethermint, we are we're leveraging the EVM and the EVM's termination model to put that on top of Tendermint consensus. So the termination issue has to be handled from the application logic. Tendermint itself is completely agnostic towards what kind of application you're running. The only requirement is that your application needs to be fully deterministic, because on seeing the same transaction, every single app instance of that application needs to come to the same conclusion. Can you elaborate on the Weave Sdk? Yes, the Weave Sdk is it's a cryptocurrency building framework written in Go. It easily plugs into the Tendermint consensus engine. So, and it's written in a style similar to how you write web servers. So that you have middleware, and with the Weave Sdk you have to define a bunch of middleware that processes your transaction and then eventually updates your state. But we provide a lot of commonly needed middleware like signature checking, authentication checking, transaction fee deduction, and so on. And we're constantly developing it since we're building the Cosmos Hub on top of it.
Weave SDK 这个，我简单说一下，这个他没有提，但是这个 Weave SDK 实际上它就是现在你要到这个 GitHub 上看，它就是 Basecoin project， 它以后就不叫 Basecoin 了，它就把它改名叫 Weave SDK， 它实际上就是基于 Tendermint 构建的，然后它相当于以类似像中间件的这种架构搭建的，像 Web Server 或者 Web Service 这样，它提供了一系列的中间件服务，像这种authentication 就是验证啊。 还有就是签名的验证啊 ，Merkle Tree Proof 啊这些，所以使得让你就是构建一个跟这个 Cosmos Hub 集成的这样一个zone 呢就变得非常容易。而实际上在这个 Weave SDK 这个新的术语下面，它这个 zone 呢也同时也就等同于叫Cosmos Application， 就是你在听到说 Cosmos Application 的时候，它就是等同于 zone。
Maybe let's pick like 2 more and then I'll continue with more technical part as well. Oh yeah, so actually we've covered this one, like the app is running independent of peer-to-peer and consensus. How are we ensuring business level consensus via peers? Via full determinism on the app side. If the first instance of an app receives one transaction and the second instance receives the same transaction, they need to come to exactly the same state changes, no matter, they just need to come to the exact same state changes. So it needs to be fully deterministic. You can't really use random numbers, you can't use floating point operations. All the sources that, for example, in video game programming you have of non-determinism you can't use also apply to building Cosmos apps.
对，他说，为了确保 business level 的这个一致性共识，在就是这个 ABCI application， 所以现在好像术语也改了，叫 Tendermint application。 必须是完全确定性的，也就是在你写代码的时候，不能用任何非确定性的这个语言特性，比方说随机数啊，还有这个浮点数啊，这些都是不能使用的。所以这样就确保在每一个节点上执行的业务逻辑结果都是完全确定的。
Okay, and let's pick this as the last question for now. What is the concrete progress with the hubs? Reward and penalty mechanism. Are they done with Ethermint, smart contracts, or through an underlying protocol? Ethermint is an application written on top of Tendermint, and as such, so Ethermint has nothing to do with the reward and penalty system. That's all handled by the Cosmos Hub, and the Cosmos Hub is right in the end also an application written on top of Tendermint consensus. The Cosmos Hub is, if someone in the network can prove that, for example, a validator double signed for a block at the same height, they get slashed, so they lose their deposit. But I will talk more about the staking and the security of staking during the technical part as well. But yeah, this is all handled within the Cosmos Hub, not within Ethermint.
Okay. 所以问题就是说，这个 Ethermint 是一个基于这个Tendermint 协议搭建的一个 EVM 兼容的一个应用，它和这个Cosmos Hub 没有任何关系，因为 Cosmos Hub 也是只不过是你要从这个角度来说，它是基于 Tendermint 的另外一个应用，所以在等会儿在这个这之后呢，这个 Adrian 会详细的讲，就是Cosmos Hub 里面是如何对就是这个 validator 的一些不好的行为进行惩罚的，这个机制他会讲的。 但是这个机制本身呢是通过 Cosmos Hub 的这个协议实现来完成的，跟 Ether 没有关系啊。
Alright, cool. Let's jump into the technical part.